All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Give me 1 second just to get a couple things going. All right. Hi, Dylan. Thanks for joining today. Okay, let's see. All right. Can everybody hear me okay and see my screen? Maybe not. Maybe just got a yes or no in the chat. All right, cool. Thanks, Dylan. All right, so thanks for joining today, everybody, and taking the time to be here. My name is Michael Prosnitz. I am the program coordinator for the Office of Strategy, Science, and Technology within the New Mexico Economic Development Department. My director, Nora Sackett, will be joining shortly. She's caught up in another important meeting right now, but she should be in a couple minutes here. Today, we're going to talk about the Advanced Energy Award Pilot Program. And what that's going to look like is I have about a 10 to 15-minute presentation to go over some of the high-level information for the grant. And then we leave a lot of time at the end for questions. Sometimes we use up all of that time, sometimes we don't. But we will be doing questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions while I'm going through the presentation, feel free to either type them in the chat or raise your hand. You will be able to unmute yourself when I call on you later if you want to ask your question verbally. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. So the goal of the Advanced Energy Award is to, actually, I'm just going to make sure it's recording real quick. Okay, we're good. The goal of the Advanced Energy Award is to assist early stage advanced energy technology companies with commercializing their technologies and, most importantly, continuing to do business in New Mexico. The grant funds are intended to be used for business development expenses. And if you're familiar with some of our other grant funding, in this context for this grant, this is less restrictive than what it's been for our other grants. And I'll go over that in detail later in one of the slides. One thing to note is that any active New Mexico Advanced Energy Award Pilot Program awardees are not eligible to apply for this round of funding and must wait one full cycle to reapply. So that would be next year's application. All right, let's talk about eligibility first. So in order to be eligible for the grant, you must be headquartered in New Mexico with 60% of your payroll located in New Mexico, at least 60%. You must be in good standing with the state of New Mexico. You must be a for-profit technology business with a focus on advanced energy. When we say technology business, we mean a business that creates a technology-based device or software, and in this case, with a focus on advanced energy for this grant. You must agree to locate the awarded business and any expansions within the state of New Mexico for the next 5 years. And this next one's an important one. The Advanced Energy Award may not be first money in. So the evaluation criteria and the application will include a question where you can discuss the portion of previously secured funding from additional sources. This can be any sort of outside funding, and there will be some documentation required for you to upload to support that. And then lastly, like all of our grants, you must agree to all reporting and clawback requirements for the grant. The award itself is between $250,000 and $1 million. When you submit your budget, you can submit a number between either of those numbers. Just make sure you have a solid use for all the funding that you are requesting. And then as a frame of reference, in fiscal year 24, that was last year, we had 7 awardees for this award. All right, let's go into eligible funding uses and ineligible funding uses. But since this is a little broader than what we've had in the past, I'm actually going to start with the ineligible funding uses because there's only two of those. The first is that you cannot spend the funding for this grant on payroll expenses, meaning you cannot pay an employee of the company, an employee that's on payroll, to do activities for the business through this grant funding. And then the second is you cannot spend grant funding on alcohol, drugs, or food. And this does include travel. So if you are submitting a travel budget for something like attending a trade show or meeting with investors, just keep that in mind that you can't include a per diem through the grant. Now, for eligible funding uses, this list is not an all-inclusive list. These are just kind of some of the things we see most often when people submit budgets for the grant. You can use the funding for things like intellectual property assessment, patent filing, research and development, laboratory or business equipment, outside lab testing and validation, regulatory assessment and certifications, meetings with customers, partners, and investors. That includes travel, attending trade shows. Caveat here is that no more than 10% of the total awarded funds can be put towards attending trade shows. And that does include things like the cost of travel, the cost of the ticket, and anything else there. And then lastly, market research and data acquisition. So again, this isn't an all-inclusive list. If you have something in mind that isn't listed here, as long as it is not within those two ineligible funding uses, you will be just fine to include that in your budget. And if you do want to double check that with me, feel free to send anything like that over my way. I'll have my email at the end, and I can confirm or deny whether or not you can use that for funding. All right. Let's talk about the application itself now. So the application is broken up into 6 sections. The first is going to be company information. Pretty straightforward here, just some basic information on the company and a person of contact just to give us a frame of reference for the company. Then the next section is for company eligibility, going through some of those criteria that I had discussed previously on that eligibility slide. So just going through some of those questions and some double checks there. The next section, the executive summary. This is going to be where most of the actual writing and application is. So there will be questions here on things like what the problem is, what your solution is, describing your team, financials, the market, market analysis, things like that, TRL level. One thing to keep in mind here is that most of the questions have a character limit of 1,250 characters. The way Salesforce works is that it does it through a character limit. So to put it in kind of a more general context, easy to understand, that's about a 250 word limit. But as you are typing these questions out, just keep it in mind that it's actually a 1,250 character limit. If you have more than that, it won't let you submit the question. Next section is going to be the budget. We're not looking for anything too intense or in-depth here for the budget. We have a template up on the application, and we're really just looking for kind of line item, description of use, and then the amount requested for each line item with the total for the budget at the bottom. Next is going to be the pitch deck. This does have some more guidelines than the budget does. So we are specifically looking for an 8-slide pitch deck, no more or no less. And we do have a description of what we're looking for on each of those slides. Just keep in mind, we are pretty strict on that slide limit. If you do include more than those 8, when we do send your application off for review, we will be cutting it off at 8 slides and sending that in for review. So please make sure you include all the information that's asked for and that you want to include within 8 slides. And then lastly, just a quick certification to ensure that everything you've submitted for the application is true to your knowledge, that you're aware of kind of the clawback agreements, as well as some of the reporting that is required throughout the duration of the grant. Throughout the application, there are a total of 5 documents to upload. The first being a letter of good standing with the state of New Mexico. You can do this through the taxation and revenue access point. And there are instructions on how to do that in the Advanced Energy Award Fiscal Year 25 Grant Manual. You can find that on our website. I believe it is at the top of page 3. It's pretty straightforward process. Once you do submit the request for it, it usually only takes about a minute or two to actually pop up in your portal. But if you do have any issues on that, sometimes people do run into issues. Just get in contact with me, and there's a couple workarounds we can try and work through. The second document is, as I discussed previously, the documentation to support previously secured funding. The next is a capitalization table. And then lastly, the budget and pitch deck that we just talked about. All right, let's talk about the evaluation process. This will help kind of give you an idea of how to frame your application and what we're looking for and what you'll be evaluated on. So the first is kind of just the overall proposal in general. The two biggest things kind of being your problem statement and your unique value proposition of how you're going to deal with that problem and how you have a solution to that problem. The second is the technology in general and the market readiness of that technology, including its commercialization potential. The third is the potential benefits that can be derived from public access to your product or your technology. Next is the potential risks and the competitive landscape, essentially the market analysis. Then the financial forecast and/or your exit strategy, if you have one. Any proposed use of the funds, your budget, the expertise of the team, and lastly, the potential of the technology and the company to develop a tax base in New Mexico and create jobs. All right. Just to give you an idea of what the process looks like if you are awarded funding and what you can expect. First, you'll be asked to sign a grant agreement and also submit a State of New Mexico W-9. This will get everything finalized and then get you set up as a vendor with the State of New Mexico to actually receive the funds. We'll go over kind of the reporting process and what that looks like, including the final report that you'll need to include at the end of the funding period, and also follow-on funding updates after funding period ends. And then lastly, you'll receive payments for the grant on a cost reimbursement basis in 4 tranches. So you receive 25% of the funds up front, and then in order to move forward with the next tranches, whether that be a total of 3 or 4 or whatever it might look like, we'll need to see an expense report and receipts for how the previous funding was spent in order to receive the next funding. All right. Then we'll go over the timeline of the grant. So applications opened January 8th of 2025. That was a week ago today, and they'll be open until February 6th at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's about 3-ish weeks from today. The grant's open for almost about a month. Please try not to get your application in last second or day of. Sometimes, you never know what can happen, technical issues, something like that. And there is a hard stop at 5 p.m. The application closes, and we will not be accepting applications past that point on February 6th. Eligible applications will then be reviewed by our Technology Research Collaborative Board, or the TRC board. Finalists will be notified in about mid-March, and then we will have the finalist presentations, and award winners will be selected in mid-April. So different from our other grants, if you've followed those, the previous for this fiscal year, this one does require a presentation at the end in order to select those award winners. So in mid-March, we select the finalists to present, and then in mid-April, those finalists present and we select award winners. And that'll be an in-person presentation. And then lastly, the awarded project must be completed by June 30th of 2026. So by the time all the paperwork goes through and everything on our side, applications will start probably about a month after April, and that gives the total duration of the grant just about a year. So just keep that in mind. And then that was all I had for the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand or type them in the chat at this point. Or if you would prefer to email or call me after the presentation, please feel free to do so. Okay, see, if you see me looking up, it's because I have all the questions over there. So one question, how much weight is placed on exit strategy as part of the grant selection criterion? We are building a long-term and sustainable business which creates high-tech jobs in New Mexico. Selling our firm exit strategy is not part of our current plan. So yeah, when I included extra strategy, that was more of an and or. We are not expecting you to have an exit strategy in the sense of selling your business. But it is important for the grant, as you just kind of, discussed quickly in your question as well, to talk through what your long-term goals are. It doesn't have to be an exit strategy as a part of that long-term goal, but we do like to see, not only how you're going to use these funds in the next year, but how those funds will then help you years after that to continue to succeed and be successful in New Mexico with your business.
Great, thank you, Michael.
And then another question, can the grant be used to produce the physical product in New Mexico? Yes, the funds can be used to produce the physical product in New Mexico. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of different fund uses and budgeting items for that. But again, as long as it is not payroll, this grant is a lot more broad for the funding use than our other previous grants have been. So outside of payroll, you're free to use the funding for whatever you need to propel your business forward, whether that's research and development, creating the physical product, selling the product, whatever it could be. Any other? Okay, sorry, there's some questions in the Q&A that I'm going to check real quick, and then I'll get to the hand, and then I'll get back to the chat questions. If you have more than one proposal, so the way we would handle multiple proposals is one company can submit a proposal for one technology. So if there are like two sister companies with two separate technologies, you can submit two proposals. But if you have one company with two different technologies, then you can only submit one proposal for one technology. Is 60% of the payroll based on the sum of the total people or the sum of the total payroll? So we do this by people, number of employees. So if you were to have 3 employees inside New Mexico, 2 employees outside of New Mexico, you would hit that 60% mark, or 6 and 10, 8 and 10. At least 60% of the employees need to be on payroll inside of New Mexico. For a company innovating within conventional energy, i.e. fossil fuels, including reducing emissions while improving productivity, assuming they meet all of the criteria, would you encourage them to apply? Let me just... Yes, yeah, we would encourage them to apply. Our definition of advanced energy, we like to leave pretty broad to encourage more applications. We try not to, limit that specifically to, certain things like battery technology or solar or hydrogen. We like to keep it a little more broad to bring in some more different technologies and different companies being able to apply for the grant. I think we have a hand raised, so we can go to Robert.
If you are self-funded, are you ineligible for
I can't hear you, Robert. I'm gonna exit out of this real quick.
If you are self-funded, are you ineligible for grants?
Still can't seem to hear you.
Let's
see if
micro. Oh, it
all
looks
right,
like.
Try one more time.
If you are self-funded, are you ineligible for grants?
This might be on my end. Give me 1 second. Okay, I still can't hear you. Would you mind just typing your question in the chat? Might be just some
Sure. Yes.
technical difficulties. Apologies for that.
Yeah, sure. Will do.
And I guess I'll just start going through some of the other questions while you do that, Robert, and then I'll skip to yours once you get it in there. All right, let's see. How long does the business have to be established in New Mexico? There's no duration or no requirements for how long the business has to be established in New Mexico. But just keep in mind that one of the requirements is that this grant cannot be first money in. So there does have to be some sort of outside funding, whatever that may look like, in the company. So typically that does usually mean the company has been around for at least a couple of years, but there's no actual hard, requirement for how long the company has been established or in New Mexico. As long as the company is headquartered in New Mexico with 60% of its payroll in New Mexico. All right. If the company is self-funded, are you ineligible for this grant? If when you say self-funded, you mean like it's only funded by founders internally of the company, then yes, unfortunately, that would be ineligible for this grant. It does have to be some sort of outside funding outside of, founders and people within the company.
Right.
Now, that could include things outside funding like family and friends. So if there is some sort of in there, then there's some leeway. But if you want to send me an email, if you want to discuss that more, feel free. Up a little bit, 1 second. So kind of a continuation of Philip's question on can the grant be used to produce the physical product in New Mexico, but it can't be used for production payroll. So if that production, again, if the funds are going internally to like an employee or someone on payroll for the company to do that production, then no. But if it's being done by, for example, a contractor and you're paying them to do the production for you, then yes, it just cannot be within company payroll. There's kind of some reasoning for that. Some of our other grant funding within the state covers that. So just kind of, some differing things where we have to cut some lines within our grant funding. We want to buy some equipment to build some plasma diagnostics. Is it okay to subcontract some EORK to Lanel? Yes, that would be fine. A little confused when you say kind of. Oh, let me read that one time. Yes, no, that would be okay. That would be fine. Just make sure, again, the more you can give us information in your budget, again, we don't need that much for the first round, but if you are selected for the second round or funded in the future, just make sure you give us all that information of where you're planning to put that money outside of the organization, and that'll be fine. Currently, we are a manufacturer developing an advanced energy product as an established company with a 50-year history, now launching a new for-profit technology business segment for this product. How would this be evaluated in terms of eligibility requirements? So if you have a new for-profit business segment, then you would need to apply for the grant with that for-profit portion of the company. But outside of that, then you would be eligible to apply as long as it's the for-profit company and you've got an advanced energy product or technology that you're developing. There's no issues there. Now that may be a little iffy. I'm not, an expert on kind of the business side of things. When you say, what was the word you used? A for-profit technology business segment. That for-profit segment may need to be a little more separate from the original company. I'm not an expert on that, but we can talk about that offline to kind of get that a little more dialed in. What type of funding qualifies? So we try to leave this broad in order to, obviously it's already kind of one cut off to require that there's some other kind of first money in before this grant. But yes, SBIR funding would be okay under that sort of out or first money in outside of this grant. SBIR funding would be good. Is there a preference for the funding to be or for the spending to be based in New Mexico? For example, having some code development overseas could save money, but funds would be then be spent outside of the state. So obviously, we would like if you use a New Mexico company to do the work you're doing. There isn't a requirement for that, and there isn't like well, if you're going to do it outside of New Mexico, then we're not going to fund you, something like that. But as long as you make your case for why it needs to be done there and can't be done in New Mexico, and obviously if it's something that really helps your business progress, then ultimately that's the important thing and what we're looking for with this funding. If it can be done in New Mexico, great. If not, just give us the reason why it can't and why you're using the people you're using, and that'll be fine. For 60% on payroll in New Mexico, is that by February 6th, or would we qualify if offers have been accepted and individuals start a couple weeks after that date? So kind of a bit iffy there. In your application, I would definitely reference that, we'll meet that 60% frame within a couple weeks. We wouldn't like it to be any more than, just a couple weeks to get that going. But if you are going to meet that point, a week or 2 or 3 weeks after the grant, then just state that in your application so we have an idea of what that will look like and to keep that in consideration. But I would definitely still apply for the funding if that is, something you'll meet, again, within a reasonable time from when the grant ends and closes on February 6th. All right. Regarding eligible advanced energy technologies, are these restricted to energy generation only, or would it include advanced uses of energy, such as desalination or carbon capture that produces a benefit to the community? Yeah, so again, we kind of like to leave this as broad as possible. So if we're talking carbon capture, reducing carbon emissions, energy generation, energy storage, anything like that would be applicable for this grant. How much total grants in 2024 among the 7 awardees? I believe in the first year we gave out around $3.5 million for the award, and we plan to do something similar for this year. I'll go to maybe some of the hands raised now. Sharon, hopefully it's not a technical issue on our side and you're able to unmute and talk. Are you there, Sharon?
Okay, can you hear me now? No?
Try one thing real quick.
Can you hear me?
All right.
Yes,
Unfortunately, I
we can hear
still
you.
don't think I can hear
No.
you.
I don't think you can.
Real quick, can
Okay.
anyone else hear Sharon, or is this an issue on
Can you hear me?
my side?
Yes, I can.
You can hear me?
I can.
It seems like other people can hear, so that's
Likewise.
give me 2 seconds to try and
Okay,
fix
how do we do
this.
this? You can hear me,
Yes, I can.
but you can't hear me.
Okay,
Okay.
wait, I
Okay.
think I might have gotten it there.
You get me now?
I can hear you now. Sorry
Okay,
about
you
that.
can hear me now. Could you
Sometimes when we
please
hook up to external
explain the
monitors, it gets
thank
a
you,
little
the
iffy.
reimbursable expenses? How do we
Mhm.
handle that? Is this money that has already been expended?
So it's a little it's technically cost reimbursement, but like I said, we do give 25% of the award at the start of the grant. So kind of with the way we mean cost reimbursement is 25% will be given up front. And then in order to move up forward with future tranches, we need an expense report and receipts for funding spent for that first invoice, and then we can move forward with the rest. We do that because not all companies have enough funding and leeway to be able to be reimbursed, so we try to be flexible in that regard. But if companies do have that leeway, then some of them will spend 2 or 3 times the amount that they invoiced for in the first invoice, and then we do it on kind of a cost reimbursement basis. So a little bit flexible there.
Example, then the subcontractors would invoice, correct? They would give the company an invoice.
Correct.
And that would be the expenditure we're looking at to be reimbursed, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So you could put an expense report if you have 5 invoices from subcontractors, maybe some lab equipment you paid for, listing what you spent the funding on and the amounts, and then you would just send in those invoices you received from them that you paid out in order to get everything okay with us.
And MSBA contracts with LANL, would that be something that we could consider or no?
Probably not. I think there would be a little bit of potentially stepping on toes there and some conflicts with government entities, but I don't know if we've had that asked before. So that might be something I need to look into and maybe get back to you.
I would appreciate that if you would, yeah. And money that has been spent to date, that's considered expenses that can be reimbursed. And how far back can we go? We go back to the first of the year, or what do we do?
So at the start of when you sign your grant agreement, so probably that would be around early May, from the timeline we currently have. Things take a little bit to process on our side. So by the time you get your first invoice, it might be about a month after that. But anything incurred from the point at which you've signed your grant agreement and everything is, official and in place can be reimbursed for.
Not prior expenditures.
Not prior, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, that clarifies everything. I'm good.
Great.
So equipment, material, anything that's been spent to date, it would have to be from the, say, April, May, June, whenever the grant is approved, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I did see one more hand raised. Eddie.
Hi there. It's actually Edie, but
Edie, my apologies.
Thanks for taking my question. And I think our company, Be Public Prefab, is outside of sort of the work you're looking to fund, but I'm going to ask my question all the same. We're a prefab company building here in New Mexico, and the high performance shells that we construct for new homes effectively gets these homes to nearly net zero, or sort of a conservation first approach. So our standard homes are using 10 to 20% of standard energy for heating and cooling. I'm wondering if the state would consider this advanced technology around energy, although it is around energy conservation upfront, not generation or not tracking software, that type of thing.
Does the company own or license kind of some sort of intellectual property for this technology?
Everything is under copyright now, but we would like to move towards patentable pieces to our assembly so that we can protect that IP. As you know, that is an expensive endeavor. We're fortunate to have services and products in market, and we're working forward. So we are always in R&D and always looking to the next product innovation and rollout, but it is a tricky investment for us to actually stop, employ those lawyers, do the research. And we're currently working with NRAIL under a tech grant to identify testing opportunities. Once we know what that testing and testing investment will be, we're certainly going to be looking at those patentable connections or parts of our work. So this kind of investment from the state would allow us to sort of pull back, hire those consultants, and identify what we can produce. Working with people like Simpson Strong Tie in developing a standardized steel bracket for the connection of these things that would be our patent that they would produce is the type of thing we're looking to fund.
Okay. So it seems like you might be kind of on the edge of what would be applicable for this grant. I think I would need a little bit more information. So I think if you want to send me an email, maybe we can discuss that either via email or set up a meeting to kind of discuss that in a little more depth.
Okay, that's great.
And
really appreciate it.
Realized I stopped sharing my screen so I could do this better, but I just put my email in the chat. Oh, I put it in wrong. One sec. Right. There we go. The second one is correct.
Where is that?
I threw it in the chat. It'll be all the way at the bottom, but here, now that I have my sound issues fixed, can go back to share the right screens. Share. All right, my email should now be back up on the screen. So, all right, let's go forward with some more questions. I see a couple more hands raised. Rick. So I'm not sure if audio issues came back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay, I just need to know where I can get a copy of your slides so I can talk to my accountants and we can start setting this stuff up.
So the webinar itself will be uploaded on our webpage. If you want the slides, you can email me and I'll send them out to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and then Philip. Had you for a second.
Hello, can you hear me?
Gotcha now.
Okay, so I was confused by the award winners are announced in March, I believe, and then there is a presentation. Is it in April? If you're an award winner in March, is that good enough? Or would you be deselected if you gave a lousy presentation? If you're a Joe Biden, and you blow you blow it.
So award winners are not selected in April. Finalists are selected in April. So those are the people who are chosen to present. And then in March, finalists are selected. And those are the people who will present in April. And then in April, after the presentations, that's when winners are selected.
Okay, based on mostly their presentation or mostly their submittal?
At that point, it will be mostly their presentation. Okay. So the application will get you to be selected as a finalist. And then to go from being a finalist to being an actual awardee, you will be judged on mostly your pitch presentation that will happen in person in April.
Okay. And how many March people are selected to go pitch, and how many pitch people are selected to win? Is it a 2-to-1 ratio or 4-to-1, or what do you think?
Probably around a 2-to-1 ratio, if not a little bit less. Like I said, last year we had 7 awardees, and that was before I had started with the department. But I assume if we're kind of following guidelines, what we've done for some other grants in the past, there might be about 12 people who are pitching, and then we cut that down to 7 or 8.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Let's see. Find where I left off with the questions in the chat. How much total grants in 2024 among the 7 award? Oh, I think I might have gone over that one. About 3.5 million in total funding between those 7 awardees. Would a project to add features to our software products for clean energy manufacturing qualify for this grant? Or probably the features added would be done through salaries, so that is not valid. But we can apply for the funding to clean energy manufacturers to use our software. Would that be sufficient? Also, marketing efforts to promote our products for clean energy manufacturing. So yes, for the first question, adding features to your software that is focused on clean energy manufacturing would be eligible for grant funding. But as you mentioned, you would not be able to pay your employee payroll to do that for you. That would have to be done kind of through some sort of contract with an outside entity in order to get that done. And then the second question. For the marketing, yes, marketing is one of the things you can use the grant funding for that we see people use quite often. And that can be marketing for, sales, marketing just to find interested parties, whatever it might be. Let's see. If you have only 1 employee in the company, 100% New Mexico location, and will build 2 more, but newly registered New Mexico company from Scottish energy company setting up a new business in New Mexico. So yes, if the 1 employee for this company, and this is, either kind of like a sister company or blanking on the technical term for it, but some sort of company under, the main company with its own name, own New Mexico registration, then yes, you would be applicable for the grant. You would fit that criteria of being headquartered in New Mexico with 100% of the employees in New Mexico, as long as you've got, all the paperwork set up for that company with the 1 employee in advance. Is preference given to businesses headquartered in rural, low-income, and high unemployment communities? Yes and no. For a lot of state funding, the answer is yes. For our grants, it's definitely something we look for and prioritize. There isn't necessarily a section to apply and say that. So make sure, if that is the case on whichever one of those it may be, that you can mention that in your application, and it's something we definitely look for. We like to support businesses all around New Mexico as much as we can. Unfortunately, for science and tech businesses, most of that's going to be located in Albuquerque or Santa Fe or Los Alamos. So when we get a good application that has a chance to be somewhere else, it's always something we look for. I won't necessarily say prioritized, but something to help the application. All right, then a bunch of I can hear you from technical difficulties. How competitive is the process? I want to say last year we had about 25 or just short of 30 applications in total and made 7 awards. So competitive, but not quite as competitive as some of our other grants, just due to kind of having that restriction on the first money in. It can cut some companies out that are a little more early stage. So we tend to see some less applications in this one than we do for some of the other grants we offer. Can applicants check with the NMEDD about eligibility of the technology by sending a brief abstract before making an effort towards a full application? Yep, definitely. So if you want to send me an email, we can either hop on a quick call or, just work it out through email. But you can definitely send me an email and we can work through your eligibility for the grant. I'd be happy to do that. The Salesforce application site. So that's just the generic application link. On the back end, we use Salesforce, but the normal application link that is on our website, you can find that'll just take you to the right application. And I can real quick, let's see. Right. And I just posted the link to our webpage for this grant, and the application link is at the bottom of that webpage, as well as the grant manual for the grant, which goes into a bunch more detail on some of the stuff I talked about. So if you have any questions on more of those specifics, again, feel free to reach out through email. And yes, I can share my phone number again. Yeah, apologies for not just having it up on the screen at all times. I seem to be having some technical difficulties when I hook into some of the monitors here. So I'm working on one screen right now. Are materials manufactured and fabricated in another state acceptable? I might need some more information on kind of how you would use those materials, or if those are, if the technology is the materials themselves or fabrication process, or kind of what that looks like, Sharon. Let me check the Q&A section too to see if anything else is put in there. All right, a couple things. So I will come back to your question, Sharon, if you type a follow-up, but for now I'm going to move on to some of these. Can a subcontractor employee working for the project be considered for that 60% eligibility criteria? No, it is going to have to be, someone on payroll for the company to be considered for that kind of 60% eligibility of the number of employees in New Mexico. So it has to be someone on payroll for the company, not contracted through the company. Now, if it is some sort of weird contract or something in place, you can, again, let me know. We can talk and kind of figure that out. But in general, rule of thumb is they have to be on payroll for the company. Can we create a new company in New Mexico for this project? Sure. You can definitely do that. Again, there does need to be some sort of first money in prior to applying for this grant. So if you're able to create a company and get some sort of outside funding or investment in that time, you can definitely apply. But otherwise, it might have to be, something to make a company and get that funding and apply for the next year. Research and development work can be done outside of the USA, sure. Again, we just need some sort of kind of written thing or explanation of why it has to be done outside of the US, outside of New Mexico. Okay, I think that was all for that. So I'll head back to the chat. Yes, Sharon. In that case, if it's assembled in New Mexico and some of the materials are manufactured and fabricated in another state, then that would be fine. How will the EDD want to verify first funding in? So in the application, there's a question where we ask you to list previously secured funding for the company and then upload documentation to support that funding. So make sure you fill that out to the best of your knowledge and include whatever supporting documentation proves that outside funding came to the company, or, if it's a notice of award for a grant or whatever it might be, make sure to include that. You can upload as many files as you want into that question. Just make sure there's a little upload button in the question. So if you attach documents and don't hit that upload button, it won't actually upload them. So just a kind of off note there, because we get that question sometimes. There's a little upload button you have to hit to actually upload the attached documents. Can the new and only job be advertised but not secured before application and secured by shortlisting? That might be where we kind of would have to draw the line there. We would likely need there to actually be a person that is selected for that role and actually on payroll for the company in order to be considered, 100% headquartered in New Mexico. Now, again, as I mentioned before, where we had kind of the other question, if there is a new hire coming on within, we're talking maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks maximum of when the grant closes, you can apply stating that. But if it's going to be any more than that, then we kind of we'll have to cut the line and draw it there. And yeah. Okay. One more question. Employee works for engineering facility in New Mexico, works on-site in New Mexico 50% and remotely in Texas 50%. Does this person count as payroll in New Mexico? That's a good question. I don't know if we've had that question before and had someone kind of working on-site 50% of the time and remotely 50% of the time. I would have to get back to you on that one, Susan. So if you want to send me an email on that, just to make sure it's on the top of my radar, I'll look into that and get back to you. Doesn't look like for the moment we have any questions. I don't think I missed anything. I'll be sticking around for another 5 minutes or so until 2 o'clock. So if you have any other last minute questions, feel free to ask. But besides that, we'll go ahead and end the webinar for today. So thank you everyone for joining and taking the time to be here today and learn about this grant. It's great to see the participation and amount of people who showed up and are interested. So thank you. And there are a couple more questions, so I'll get to those real quick. Is this grant annual? Yes, this grant is annual. As of right now, it is a pilot program, so we need to do a little bit of work during the legislative session that's coming up to get it to a full program, but we're not very concerned about that. So likely it will be an annual event or annual grant going forward. Sharon wanted a little clarification on the first funding in. So first funding in can, be, again, we like to leave it vague because we don't want people to think what we would say is like a full definitive list, but it could be anything from, previously grant funding that you've secured to maybe some angel investment or venture investment that might be a little out there. Maybe some friends and family could even count. It kind of just depends. A lot of different things could count as it. But those would kind of be the big things that we would consider outside funding. Again, it kind of, as long as it's not inside funding that like founders have put into the company themselves, then it will likely be applicable for to count as not first money in or first money in. All right, another question. Does the first funding need to be related to the project in some way? In other words, first funding contributed to the product development so far, but the project is an add-on feature for a new market, not related entirely to the purpose of the first funding. Yeah, no, that should be fine. As long as it is related in, some way to the technology you're applying for or the company you are applying with, there shouldn't be any issues there. Again, we're not trying to be very strict cut lines with this first funding in. This grant is just quite larger than some of our other grants are, so there is a little bit kind of more due diligence that goes into making sure, ultimately part of the goal of this funding is it is taxpayer dollars, so there is a little bit that goes along with it of trying to get some sort of benefit out to the state, whether that be job creation in the future, increasing the tax base from the company succeeding, things like that. So it's kind of just a little bit of a first extra step to do some more due diligence on the company. But from what you've said, I think that should be just fine. Liz. How many years does this go back? Last year was the first year we did it. So we had it an appropriation from state government to do this grant starting last year, which was fiscal year 24. And we have it also for this year, fiscal year 25, as a pilot program. And we're hoping to continue that and hopeful that it will, not very concerned, to become an actual program for our office going forward. All right, well, we are just about at the 2 o'clock point. So I'm going to head ahead and shut off the webinar. But again, thank you everybody for joining and taking the time to be here and for asking a lot of questions. That might be the most questions we've had in a webinar so far. So that's great to see people interested and actually looking into enough stuff to ask those questions beforehand. Oh, and one more question real quick. Sharon asks, first funding in for established corporation. Yeah, so first funding in for the company that you are applying for the funding for. So for example, what you would put on a W-9 to apply if you were to get the funding for the state, whatever company you would put on that W-9 would need to be the company that has received the first funding in previously. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And if you have any questions going forward, please feel free to reach out through email or call my phone. I'll always be there to answer. Thank you very much.